Wade Mercer wiped condensation from his bathroom mirror, staring at the reflection he barely recognized. At 42 years old, there was more salt than pepper in his once dark hair. His deep-set eyes had lost their spark years ago. Running a hand over his stubbled jaw, he wondered when he'd started looking so defeated. The sounds of his wife Vanessa's laughter drifted up from the kitchen below. Her sister Heather was visiting again, the third time this week. Those visits always left Wade feeling like an outsider in his own home. The two women would switch to hushed tones whenever he entered a room. "Just family gossip," Vanessa would say with that practiced smile that never reached her eyes. Wade straightened his tie, a navy blue Calvin Klein that Vanessa had bought him for his birthday 5 years ago. It was the only designer item in his wardrobe, and she never let him forget it. "You need to look the part if you want Trent to take you seriously," she'd said, referencing her brother-in-law who had reluctantly offered Wade a position at Lowell Industries after his previous company downsized. Wade had been a project manager at Griffin Technologies for 15 years before the layoffs. Now he was a mid-level operations analyst at Lowell, a glorified number cruncher with half his former salary and none of the respect. The house they lived in, a colonial revival in Boston's affluent Beacon Hill neighborhood, had been purchased during better days. The mortgage payments were becoming increasingly difficult to manage, a fact that Vanessa reminded him of during their increasingly frequent arguments. "Morning," Wade said as he entered the kitchen, where Vanessa and Heather sat at the marble island, designer coffee cups in hand and manicured fingers resting next to them. Heather Lowell, tall, blonde, and perpetually judgmental, gave him a once-over. "Big meeting today, Wade." The question contained a subtle mockery he'd grown accustomed to. "Just quarterly projections," he replied, pouring coffee into a chipped mug that Caleb, his son from his first marriage, had made in elementary school. Vanessa checked her Cartier watch, a gift from her parents on their wedding day. "Don't forget we have dinner with the Hollands tonight. Preston said he might have a lead on something more suitable for you." The implication was clear. After 3 years at Lowell Industries, Wade was still considered temporary help, someone who needed to be fixed by Vanessa's wealthy connections. "I'll be there," Wade said, knowing the evening would consist of him being quietly evaluated and found wanting by Vanessa's social circle. As he left, he caught a glimpse of a text message on Vanessa's phone. "He's gone. Call me." A knot formed in Wade's stomach, but he pushed the feeling down. He'd been ignoring the signs for months. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the sudden interest in fitness that had her leaving the house in outfits that seemed designed for anything but exercise. At Lowell Industries, Wade sat in his cramped office reviewing spreadsheets when his desk phone rang. "Mercer," he answered. "My office." Now, it was Trent Lowell, CEO, brother-in-law, and the man who made it clear daily that Wade's employment was a favor to Vanessa, not a recognition of his abilities. Trent's corner office was all glass and chrome, with views of Boston Harbor that emphasized the power distance between them. Trent himself was lounging in an ergonomic chair that probably cost more than Wade's monthly salary, his athletic frame dressed in a tailored suit that screamed old money. "Close the door," Trent said without looking up from his computer. Wade complied, noting the presence of Lawrence Byrne, Lowell's CFO, sitting stiffly in a leather armchair. Byrne's expression was unreadable behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You've been with us 3 years now," Trent began, finally meeting Wade's eyes. "And while I appreciate the domestic harmony your employment here has facilitated, the board is implementing structural changes." Wade felt his chest tighten. "What kind of changes?" "The redundancy kind," Trent replied with a thin smile. "Your department is being consolidated with analytics. Unfortunately, there won't be a place for you in the new structure." The words hit like physical blows. "You're firing me." "Letting you go," Trent corrected, "with a modest severance, of course. Lawrence will handle the details." He stood, extending a hand that Wade didn't take. "I'm sure you'll land on your feet. Vanessa mentioned Preston Holland might have something for you." The humiliation burned hotter than the anger. Wade looked between the two men, realizing this had probably been planned for weeks, perhaps even with Vanessa's knowledge. When Wade asked, his voice surprisingly steady, "Today will be your last day." Byrne interjected, sliding a folder across the desk. "All the paperwork is here. HR has already prepared your final check." Wade took the folder without opening it. "Did my wife know about this?" Trent's momentary hesitation was answer enough. "That's not relevant to this discussion." "I see," Wade said, though what he was seeing went far beyond this office, this moment. Pieces were falling into place. Vanessa's recent distance, Heather's increased presence, the whispered conversations. As Wade packed his meager belongings into a cardboard box, his cell phone pinged with a text from Vanessa. Trent called. "We need to talk tonight. Don't be dramatic about this." Wade slipped the phone back into his pocket without responding. For the first time in years, a different emotion was replacing his resignation, something sharp and clarifying. He wasn't just angry, he was awake. In the parking garage, Wade placed his box in the trunk of his aging BMW, another relic from better days. As he closed the trunk, a voice called his name. Wade Mercer. He turned to face a stranger, a man in his 60s with silver hair and keen eyes, dressed in a simple but clearly expensive suit. "My name is Solomon Blackfield," the man said, offering a business card. "I've been following your career with interest. Perhaps we could discuss your future over lunch." Wade looked at the card. "Solomon Blackfield, founder, Blackfield Ventures. Why would you be interested in me?" Wade asked, suspicious of the timing. Solomon's smile was enigmatic. "Let's just say I recognize potential when others miss it. And I've been watching Lowell Industries for quite some time. You might be exactly what I've been looking for." As Wade drove to the restaurant Solomon had suggested, he couldn't have known that this chance meeting would be the first domino in a chain that would reshape everything and everyone in his life. The Metropolitan Club's private dining room felt like another world, one Wade had glimpsed only through the stories Vanessa brought home from her lunches with Heather and their social circle. Solomon Blackfield ordered a bottle of wine without consulting the price, his movements displaying the casual confidence of someone who belonged. 15 years at Griffin Technologies, rising from junior analyst to project manager, Solomon said, reviewing Wade's career from memory. Then downsized during their acquisition, landing at Lowell Industries where you've been systematically sidelined, despite consistently strong performance reviews. Wade's surprise must have shown on his face. "I do my homework, Mr. Mercer," Solomon explained, "especially when I'm considering a significant investment." "Investment in what?" Wade asked. "I was just fired this morning." "In you," Solomon replied simply. "More specifically, in what you could do with the right backing and freedom from constraining influences." The waiter arrived with their wine, pouring 2 glasses of a rich Burgundy before disappearing again. "During your time at Griffin, you developed an inventory management system that increased efficiency by 34%, Solomon continued. "At Lowell, your quarterly analysis identified supply chain vulnerabilities that, if addressed, would have saved them millions, recommendations that Trent Lowell ignored." Wade stared at the older man. "How do you know all this?" "As I said, I do my homework. I also know that Trent Lowell is running his company into the ground with outdated methodologies and vanity projects. The board keeps him because of the family name, but Lowell Industries is a house of cards." Solomon leaned forward. "What would you say if I told you I want to acquire Lowell Industries, and I want you to lead the new company after the acquisition?" Wade nearly choked on his wine. "That's absurd. I don't have the experience or credentials to run a company that size." "Credentials are papers, Mr. Mercer. What matters is vision and execution. You have both. What you lack is confidence and opportunity." Solomon smiled. "I'm offering you the latter. The former, you'll need to find for yourself." As lunch progressed, Solomon outlined his proposal. Wade would join Blackfield Ventures as a consultant, while privately studying Lowell's vulnerabilities. Together, They would form a new company, Meridian Technologies, with Wade as CEO. Blackfield would provide the capital to acquire Lowell Industries when the time was right. "Why me?" Wade asked finally. "There must be dozens of more qualified executives you could hire." Solomon's expression grew serious. "I've been watching how Trent Lowell operates for years. He's rejected multiple partnership offers from me. Always condescending. Always assuming his family name makes him untouchable. I want someone who understands Lowell's weaknesses from the inside. Someone with the intelligence to see opportunities others miss. And if I'm being perfectly candid, someone with personal motivation to see this through." Wade felt a chill. "You know about my relationship with Trent. I know he's your brother-in-law. I know he hired you reluctantly and fired you callously. That kind of treatment tends to sharpen one's focus." After lunch, Wade sat in his car, Solomon's business card in hand. The offer seemed impossible, too good, too convenient, too perfectly aligned with the anger simmering inside him. Yet the alternative was returning home to Vanessa with news of his termination, facing her disappointment, and beginning the humiliating process of begging for jobs through her connections. His phone had been buzzing throughout lunch, texts from Vanessa demanding updates, asking if he was coming to dinner with the Hollands. He hadn't responded to any of them. Instead, he called Solomon Blackfield and accepted his offer. Wade arrived home at 8, well after the time he was supposed to meet Vanessa for dinner with the Hollands. The house was dark except for a light in the kitchen. He found Vanessa sitting at the island, still dressed for dinner, a half-empty wine glass in front of her. "You missed dinner," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Preston was expecting you." "I had to make excuses." Wade poured himself a whiskey, taking his time before responding. "I was busy. She laughed incredulously. "Busy doing what?" "Feeling sorry for yourself. Trent called me this afternoon." "Of course he did," Wade interrupted. "Did he call before or after he decided to fire me?" Vanessa's momentary hesitation confirmed what he already suspected. "It's a business decision, Wade. These things happen. Preston said he might have a position in his firm's marketing department. I'm not interested in Preston's charity." "Don't be ridiculous. You need a job." "I have one," Wade replied, watching her expression carefully. "I received an offer today." Surprise flickered across Vanessa's features. "From whom?" "Solomon Blackfield. I'll be working with him directly on a new venture." Vanessa's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Solomon Blackfield, the venture capitalist." Her tone shifted from dismissive to calculating. "That's unexpected. What position?" "Executive consultant, for now, with potential for advancement." For the first time in months, perhaps years, Wade saw genuine respect in his wife's eyes, or at least the closest approximation she could manage. It was telling that she didn't ask about salary or responsibilities, only the prestige of the connection. "We should celebrate," she said. Her earlier anger had mysteriously evaporated. "I could invite the Lowells for dinner this weekend. Heather would be impressed, and Trent." "I'd rather keep this between us for now," Wade interrupted. "No need to tell family until things are more settled." Vanessa seemed disappointed, but nodded. "If that's what you want." She stood, smoothing her dress. "I'm going to bed. Don't stay up too late." As she kissed his cheek, her first affectionate gesture in weeks, Wade caught a whiff of unfamiliar cologne. Not his, and certainly not Preston Holland's. After she left, Wade poured another whiskey and opened his laptop. He navigated to the family cell phone account and examined the call and text records for the past 3 months. The pattern was undeniable. Dozens of calls and hundreds of texts between Vanessa and a number he recognized as Trent's private line. The timestamps told their own story. Calls when Wade was at work, texts late at night. Communication that went far beyond a simple family connection. One particular cluster stood out, a flurry of calls the day before his termination. Wade closed the laptop, a cold clarity settling over him. The humiliation he'd felt that morning was transforming into something harder, more focused. Solomon had offered him an opportunity, yes, but also something even more valuable, a path to justice. His phone buzzed with a text from Solomon. Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. my office. Bring your insights on Lowell's operational weaknesses. The real work begins now. Wade finished his whiskey and headed upstairs. Vanessa was already asleep, or pretending to be, as he gathered his pillow and a blanket. Where are you going? She mumbled, not opening her eyes. Guest room, he replied. I don't want to disturb you. She didn't object, which told him everything he needed to know. In the solitude of the guest bedroom, Wade began making notes about Lowell Industries. Its vulnerabilities, its weaknesses, the projects Trent had mismanaged. By morning, he had filled a notebook with the beginnings of what would become Trent Lowell's downfall, and possibly his wife's as well. Blackfield Ventures occupied the 38th floor of a gleaming tower in downtown Boston, its reception area a study in understated wealth. All clean lines, muted colors, and original artwork. Wade felt distinctly out of place in his off-the-rack suit as the receptionist escorted him to Solomon's office. Ah, Mr. Mercer, Solomon greeted him, rising from behind a massive desk. Right on time, Solomon said, gesturing to a seating area where a young woman was already waiting. This is Nadia Reeves, my chief strategic officer. She'll be working closely with you on this project. Nadia was perhaps 35, with sharp features and alert eyes that missed nothing. Her handshake was firm, her assessment of Wade openly curious. Solomon speaks highly of your analytical abilities, she said. I'm looking forward to seeing if you live up to the hype. The meeting lasted 3 hours, during which Wade presented his analysis of Lowell Industries, its outdated supply chain, its bloated management structure, its failure to adapt to emerging market trends. Solomon and Nadia listened intently, occasionally interrupting with questions that pushed Wade to deeper insights. Impressive, Nadia said when he finished. You've identified weaknesses that wouldn't be obvious to anyone without internal knowledge. A pause. Though I'm curious about your personal stake in this. Solomon mentioned you were recently let go from Lowell. Wade met her gaze steadily. Yes, by my brother-in-law, Trent Lowell. I see. Nadia exchanged a glance with Solomon. Family dynamics complicate things. Only if you let them, Wade replied. Solomon smiled. Indeed, which brings us to the next phase. He slid a folder across the table. This is your formal offer letter. Executive Vice President of Operations at Meridian Technologies, our new venture. The salary is outlined on page 3. Wade opened the folder and nearly dropped it when he saw the figure. Triple what he'd been making at Lowell. This is generous, he managed. It's market rate for someone of your capabilities, Solomon countered. Review it. Sign it, and we can begin the real work tomorrow. As Wade left the building, contract signed, and a new company ID card in his pocket, he felt like a different person from the one who had walked into Trent's office the day before. His phone showed 5 missed calls from Vanessa. He ignored them all. Instead, he drove to a coffee shop across town and called his son, Caleb, now 20 and in his second year at NYU. Dad? Caleb sounded surprised. They hadn't spoken in weeks, another casualty of Wade's increasingly strained home life. Everything okay? Everything's changing, Wade replied. I've left Lowell Industries. New job, new direction. Mom mentioned Uncle Trent was planning to let you go, Caleb said, then immediately seemed to regret his words. I mean, your mother knew. The confirmation shouldn't have hurt. He'd already suspected as much, but hearing it from his son twisted the knife. She and Aunt Heather were talking about it last week when I called, Caleb admitted reluctantly. I'm sorry, Dad. I should have warned you. Last week, while Vanessa was still sleeping beside him, while she was still pretending everything was normal, she had known his termination was coming. It's not your fault, Wade assured his son, but I'd appreciate it if you kept my new position quiet for now. I'm working with Solomon Blackfield on a significant project. Caleb whistled. Blackfield. Seriously, that's a major step up from Lowell. Yes, it is, Wade agreed. How would you feel about coming to Boston for a visit soon? We could catch up properly. I'd like that, Caleb said, sounding genuinely pleased. Next weekend, maybe. After saying goodbye, Wade sat watching people hurry past the coffee shop window, each absorbed in their own concerns. His phone buzzed again. Vanessa, now texting. Where are you? Heather and Trent are coming for dinner. You need to be here. The last place Wade wanted to be was at a dinner table with Trent and Heather, pretending civility while they gloated over his dismissal. He texted back, working late with the new team. Don't wait up. Then he turned off his phone and headed to the one place he knew he could think clearly, the Boston Public Library. There, surrounded by the quiet industry of strangers, Wade began mapping out his future and the careful dismantling of his past. 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Wade moved into a corporate apartment provided by Blackfield Ventures, telling Vanessa he needed to be closer to work during the critical startup phase. She didn't argue, seemed almost relieved. In fact, though she insisted on maintaining appearances, people will talk if you move out completely, she said during one of his brief visits home to collect more clothes. Just tell everyone you're working such long hours that it's more convenient to stay downtown during the week. Wade found her concern for appearances ironic, given what he now knew. His investigation into her relationship with Trent had yielded more evidence than he wanted. Credit card statements showing hotel charges when she was supposedly at spa weekends with Heather. Location data from her phone showing regular visits to an apartment in Cambridge owned by a Lowell Industries shell company. The betrayal was comprehensive, not just an affair, but a complete undermining of his life. Trent hadn't just taken Wade's job. He'd taken his dignity, his wife, and very nearly his future. But that future was now taking shape in unexpected ways. Under Solomon's mentorship, Wade was building Meridian Technologies into what would become Lowell's most significant competitor. They were recruiting key talent, developing proprietary systems based on Wade's earlier innovations, and quietly accumulating Lowell's stock through various proxies. We're nearly ready for Phase 2, Solomon announced during their Friday strategy meeting. Nadia and Wade sat across from him, reviewing the latest acquisition projections. Lowell's second quarter results will be announced next month. Our intelligence suggests they'll significantly underperform expectations. Trent's been hiding weaknesses through creative accounting, Wade confirmed. But they can't disguise the Westlake project failure. That's going to hit their bottom line hard. When it does, their stock will drop, Nadia continued. We'll increase our position, and by third quarter, we'll be ready to make our move, Solomon finished. Which brings me to an important question. Wade, are you prepared for what comes next? This won't just be a business transaction. For you, it's personal. Wade thought about Vanessa's increasingly transparent lies, about Heather's smug condescension during his last visit home, about Trent's casual cruelty in dismissing him after years of service. I'm ready, he said firmly, more than ready. What he didn't share was how he spent his evenings, meticulously documenting Trent and Vanessa's affair, mapping the connections between Trent's business decisions and their relationship, building a case that would destroy not just Trent's career, but his marriage and reputation as well. Good, Solomon nodded. Because tomorrow night is the Hudson Foundation Gala. Lowell Industries is a major donor, which means Trent will be there, along with the board members we need to influence. It's time to introduce the business community to the new CEO of Meridian Technologies. Wade froze. CEO? I thought I was Executive VP. Solomon smiled. That was Phase 1. Phase 2 requires someone with personal stakes in the outcome. The paperwork was finalized this morning. Nadia handed Wade another folder. His new contract, with a title and compensation package that made his previous agreement look paltry. You've more than proven yourself these past weeks, she said. The question is, are you ready to step into the spotlight? Once we do this, there's no going back to anonymity. Wade thought about the life he'd been living. The gradual erosion of his self-worth, the silent humiliations, the betrayals large and small. He thought about Vanessa and Trent, about Heather's cutting remark when he'd lost his job. "Now she'll finally leave you. I'm done hiding," he said, signing the contract with a steady hand. "Let them see exactly who I've become." What none of them could have anticipated was how quickly that revelation would come, or how drastically it would alter the lives of everyone involved. The Hudson Foundation Gala transformed the Boston Museum of Fine Arts into a landscape of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over priceless artifacts and even more valuable connections. Wade adjusted his custom-tailored tuxedo, a far cry from the worn suit he'd worn to Trent's office just weeks ago, and surveyed the room with newly confident eyes. Solomon materialized beside him, champagne flutes in hand. "Your debut evening as Meridian CEO," he said, passing Wade a glass. Nervous, focused, Wade corrected, accepting the champagne. "Trent just arrived with Heather. The Lowell Industries board members are near the Egyptian exhibit." Solomon followed his gaze to where Trent stood holding court, Heather on his arm in a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Your wife didn't accompany him this evening. Vanessa texted earlier claiming a migraine." Wade replied, his tone neutral. A convenient excuse. What he didn't mention was that he'd hired a private investigator to document Vanessa's actual whereabouts. Bradford Cole was discreet, thorough, and currently watching Vanessa and Trent's secret apartment in Cambridge. "The board chairman just noticed us," Solomon murmured. "Shall we begin?" What followed was a masterclass in strategic networking. Solomon introduced Wade to Boston's business elite as the visionary behind Meridian Technologies' groundbreaking supply chain integration system, a system based on ideas Trent had rejected at Lowell. Wade spoke with confidence born of preparation and genuine expertise, discussing market trends and technological innovations with a clarity that drew growing circles of interested listeners. From the corner of his eye, he noticed Trent becoming aware of the shift in attention. Trent's expression darkened as he tried to identify the newcomer commanding such interest. Who was that with Solomon Blackfield? Wade overheard Trent asking a board member. "Meridian's new CEO, apparently," the board member replied. "Brilliant fellow. Just explained how they're revolutionizing the very space Lowell is struggling with." The moment of recognition, when it came, was everything Wade could have hoped for. Trent's face transformed from curiosity to shock to barely concealed rage in the span of seconds. He excused himself from his conversation and made a beeline for Wade, Heather trailing uncertainly behind. "Wade," Trent's voice carried forced joviality. "What an unexpected surprise. I didn't realize you were acquainted with Solomon." Wade turned, allowing himself a moment to appreciate Trent's discomfort before responding. "Trent, Heather, lovely to see you both." His smile never reached his eyes. "Solomon and I have been working together since shortly after my departure from Lowell." He recognized opportunities that others missed. Solomon extended a hand to Trent. "Mr. Lowell, we've crossed paths at events before, though you've always been too busy for substantive conversation. Wade speaks highly of Lowell's potential, if not its current leadership." The implied criticism wasn't lost on Trent, whose handshake turned perfunctory. Heather's eyes darted between the men, her social instincts sensing danger. "Meridian Technologies," she said, focusing on the safer topic. "I don't believe I'm familiar with it." "We're relatively new," Wade replied, "but growing rapidly, particularly in sectors where established companies have failed to innovate." He turned to Trent. "Our integration systems are already attracting clients who find traditional approaches insufficient." The double meaning hung in the air between them. Before Trent could respond, Nadia joined their circle, tablet in hand. "Mr. Mercer, I have those projections you requested," she said, then feigned surprise at seeing the Lowells. "Oh, I'm sorry. Am I interrupting?" "Not at all," Wade assured her. "Trent, Heather, this is Nadia Reeves, our Chief Strategic Officer." "Nadia, this is Trent Lowell, CEO of Lowell Industries, and his wife, Heather. Nadia's smile was professionally pleasant. "Mr. Lowell, your company has come up in several of our strategic discussions. Wade has provided valuable insights into areas where Meridian can improve upon Lowell's established practices." Trent's jaw tightened. Has he indeed? I'm surprised he would have such detailed knowledge, given his limited role at our company. Limited by design, perhaps, Solomon interjected smoothly. "Fortunately, we believe in allowing talent room to flourish. If you'll excuse us, the governor has just arrived, and Wade should make his introduction." As they moved away, Wade heard Heather hissing to Trent, "Did you know about this? Why didn't Vanessa say anything?" The evening continued in similar fashion, Wade building connections while Trent grew increasingly agitated, attempting to counter Meridian's growing buzz with increasingly desperate assertions of Lowell's market position. By the time Wade prepared to leave, his success was evident in the business cards filling his pocket and the invitations to private meetings with potential investors and clients. Outside, as the valet brought his new Tesla, another symbol of his transformation, Wade's phone buzzed with a text from Bradford Cole. "Target A met Target B at Cambridge location, 8:17 p.m. Photographic evidence secured. Returning to surveillance." Targets A and B, Vanessa and Trent. The migraine excuse, exposed for the lie it was. As Wade drove back to his corporate apartment, he allowed himself a moment of raw emotion, not grief or betrayal, but a cold, clarifying anger that crystallized his resolve. In his apartment, Wade opened his laptop and reviewed the evidence Bradford had already provided. Photographs of Vanessa and Trent entering and leaving the Cambridge apartment on multiple occasions, time-stamped records of their meetings coinciding with their excuses to their respective spouses, financial transfers showing Trent had been funding Vanessa's personal shopping expenses for at least 2 years. Most damning was an email chain Bradford had recovered from a cloud backup of Vanessa's phone. Messages between her and Trent discussing Wade's termination weeks before it happened, planning how to manage Wade's reaction, even joking about his inevitable pathetic response. "He'll probably just take whatever scraps Preston offers him," Vanessa had written. "He always settles for less than he deserves. It's why he's so easy to control." Trent's response had been even more cutting. "Once he's untethered from Lowell, we'll have more freedom. Heather barely notices my schedule anymore. But having him underfoot at the office is becoming tiresome." Wade closed the laptop, his path forward crystallizing with perfect clarity. The business strategy to acquire Lowell Industries was proceeding exactly as planned. Solomon's connections, Nadia's expertise, and Wade's insider knowledge combining to create an unstoppable momentum. But the personal reckoning would require separate handling, with timing that had to be perfectly orchestrated. His phone rang. Vanessa calling for the third time that evening. He answered, curious to hear what new lies she would offer. "Wade." She sounded relieved, then quickly shifted to irritation. "Why haven't you been answering?" "I've been worried." "Have you?" His tone was neutral, giving away nothing. "How's your migraine?" A slight pause. "Better." The medication finally kicked in. "Where are you?" "It's late." "At my apartment." The gala ran long. "Gala?" Genuine confusion in her voice. "What gala?" "The Hudson Foundation event." "Quite illuminating. I met your brother-in-law there." Another pause, longer this time. "Trent was at a charity event." "With Heather," Wade confirmed. "He seemed surprised to see me, almost as surprised as I was that you didn't mention your migraine when we spoke this morning." "It came on suddenly," Vanessa stammered. "You know how they are. Are you coming home this weekend?" Wade considered his response carefully. "Not this weekend. I have meetings, but I'm thinking we should plan a dinner party soon, perhaps next week, to celebrate my new position." "New position?" Interest sharpened her tone. "Has something changed?" "Everything has changed, Vanessa," Wade replied. "I've been named CEO of Meridian Technologies. We're planning to announce it publicly next week." The shocked silence on the other end was satisfying. When Vanessa spoke again, her voice had transformed. The contempt replaced by a calculating warmth that once might have fooled him. "Wade, that's wonderful. Why didn't you tell me sooner? We should definitely celebrate. I could invite the Lowells, the Hollands. Make it a proper event." "Perfect," Wade agreed. "I'll have my assistant coordinate with you, and Vanessa, make sure you're available. This is one event you won't want to miss." After ending the call, Wade sent a text to Solomon. "Acceleration approved. Begin Phase 3. The response came immediately. "Understood. Board contacts report Lowell stock already destabilizing. Acquisition timeline updated." Wade poured himself a scotch and stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at Boston's illuminated skyline. In one of those distant buildings, Lowell Industries continued operating, unaware that in less than 30 days, it would belong to the man Trent had so carelessly discarded. And that was just the beginning of what Wade planned to take from him. The transformation of Wade Mercer continued with methodical precision. If 3 months ago he had been invisible, overlooked at Lowell, disregarded at home, now he was becoming impossible to ignore. Meridian Technologies' rapid ascent dominated business conversations throughout Boston. Their innovative integration system, built from the ideas Trent had rejected, was revolutionizing supply chain management for a growing roster of Fortune 500 clients. The company's valuation had tripled in 6 weeks, fueled by Solomon's connections and Wade's visionary leadership. Inside Meridian's sleek headquarters, Wade sat reviewing acquisition projections with Nadia and their legal team. The numbers told a compelling story. Lowell Industries stock was in free fall following a disastrous quarterly report. Trent had attempted to blame market conditions, but analysts had pointed to leadership failures and systematic underinvestment in innovation. "We're approaching the threshold," Nadia observed, highlighting figures on her tablet. "Another 5% drop and our tender offer becomes viable. The board will have fiduciary responsibility to consider it." Wade nodded, satisfaction warming his chest. "And our intelligence on board sentiment. 7 of 11 members have expressed private concerns about Trent's leadership," replied Dexter Bishop, their sharp-eyed legal counsel. 3 are openly discussing replacement options. The timing couldn't be better. "What about the dinner party this weekend?" Nadia asked. "Is that still proceeding as planned?" Wade's smile was sharp-edged. "Absolutely. Vanessa has been working tirelessly on the guest list. The Lowell Industries board chairman confirmed yesterday, as did several key shareholders. What he didn't mention was his private conversation with Bradford Cole that morning. The investigator had delivered a comprehensive dossier documenting Trent and Vanessa's affair. Photographs, financial records, text message transcripts, and hotel receipts spanning 2 years. Most valuable was a recording from the Cambridge apartment captured via methods Bradford had assured Wade were technically legal, if ethically ambiguous. On it, Trent and Vanessa discussed not just their relationship, but their orchestration of Wade's firing and their plans for his remaining assets once Vanessa divorced him. "He'll never fight for anything," Vanessa had said, her voice cold with contempt. "That's his fundamental weakness. He'll give me the house just to avoid confrontation. Once the division is finalized, we can consider our options," Trent had replied. Heather would never grant a divorce without taking everything, but with the right pressure. The conversation had confirmed what Wade had suspected. Their ultimate plan involved Trent leaving Heather for Vanessa, once Wade had been fully divested of his assets and dignity. Now Wade checked his watch. "If there's nothing else, I have a lunch appointment." The mysterious weekly meeting, Nadia noted with a raised eyebrow. "One day you'll have to tell us who commands such regular attention from our CEO." Wade simply smiled as he gathered his things. All in good time. His destination was a small Italian restaurant in Cambridge, unassuming enough to avoid attention, prestigious enough to ensure privacy. His lunch companion was already waiting. Heather Lowell, impeccably dressed and visibly nervous. "Wade," she greeted him, tension evident beneath her practiced smile. This is becoming quite the regular occurrence. Thank you for continuing to meet me. He replied, taking his seat. I know discretion is important to you. Their first lunch 3 weeks ago had been a calculated risk. Wade reaching out to Heather directly, suggesting a private conversation about matters concerning both their families. Her curiosity had overwhelmed her initial disdain, especially when Wade had hinted at financial concerns regarding Lowell Industries that might affect her considerable personal wealth. What had begun as an information-gathering exercise had evolved into something more complex. Heather, it turned out, was sharper than her socialite exterior suggested, and increasingly suspicious of her husband's activities. I've been reviewing those investment opportunities you mentioned, she said after they ordered. The timing seems advantageous, especially given Lowell's recent challenges. Wade nodded. Solomon's fund has consistently outperformed the market. Given the uncertainties facing Lowell Industries, diversification would be prudent. Trent insists everything is under control, Heather said, studying Wade's expression. He claims this downturn is temporary. And you believe him? Wade kept his tone neutral. Heather's laugh held little humor. I stopped believing everything my husband says some time ago. She took a sip of water, her gaze direct. Just as I imagine you've developed similar skepticism about Vanessa. The direct reference to their respective marital problems hung between them. During previous lunches, they'd maintained the fiction that their meetings were purely about financial matters, with only oblique references to personal concerns. What exactly are you suggesting, Heather? She leaned forward. I'm suggesting we stop pretending. You didn't invite me to lunch because you're concerned about my investment portfolio, and I didn't accept because I needed financial advice. Wade considered his response carefully. Having Heather as an ally rather than an adversary could accelerate his plans significantly, but only if her motivation aligned with his objectives. Why did you accept then? Because unlike my husband, I can recognize when the balance of power has shifted. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against the tablecloth. Trent has been distracted, secretive. The company is failing under his leadership, and suddenly you, the man he disparaged for years, are Boston's newest business success story. Her smile turned calculating. I find the symmetry interesting. And what would you want from this conversation, assuming we're being honest with each other? Protection, she replied without hesitation. Trent has been moving assets, changing account permissions. I believe he's preparing for some significant change, one that wouldn't benefit me. Wade maintained his neutral expression, though inwardly he was pleased. Heather had independently identified the threat without knowing its specific nature. You believe Trent is planning to leave you. It wasn't a question, but Heather answered anyway. I know he is. What I don't know is with whom, when, or what he's planning to take with him. Her eyes narrowed. But I suspect you might have insights. This was the moment of strategic decision. How much to reveal, how much to withhold. Wade opted for a calculated partial truth. I have reason to believe Trent is involved in a serious relationship outside his marriage, he confirmed, and that this relationship has influenced both personal and professional decisions over the past 2 years. Heather's composure barely flickered, though her knuckles whitened around her water glass. With whom? I have substantial evidence, but before I share it, I need to understand what you intend to do with this information. Heather's laugh was brittle. What any self-respecting woman with a bulletproof prenuptial agreement would do. Ensure I get everything I'm entitled to before he can hide it. She leaned forward. The Lowell family fortune is legally protected. It remains with the bloodline, regardless of marital status. But everything we've built during our marriage, that's subject to division, including his controlling interest in Lowell Industries, Wade noted, which the prenup specifically addresses. Heather's eyebrows rose. You've seen my prenuptial agreement. I've seen enough legal documentation to understand the relevant points, Wade replied smoothly. If Trent initiates divorce proceedings, especially under circumstances involving infidelity, your financial position would be significantly strengthened, and Lowell Industries would be destabilized further, creating opportunities for strategic restructuring. Understanding dawned in Heather's eyes. You're planning to acquire Lowell. Meridian Technologies is exploring multiple growth opportunities, Wade answered diplomatically. Lowell's current vulnerabilities make it an attractive target, and my husband would lose control of his family company. Heather's smile turned genuine. How deliciously appropriate. She studied Wade carefully. But why tell me any of this? I could warn Trent. You could, Wade acknowledged, but you won't, because it doesn't serve your interests. If Trent knows what's coming, he'll accelerate his own plans, including whatever financial maneuvers he's making to disadvantage you. Heather considered this, then nodded. So we have aligned interests, at least temporarily. What exactly are you proposing? A limited partnership, Wade replied. I provide you with evidence of Trent's infidelity, enough to secure your financial position. You remain publicly supportive of Trent until the critical moment, preventing him from suspecting what's coming. And when is this critical moment? The dinner party at my home this Saturday, Wade said. The Lowell board members and shareholders will be present. So will Trent, Vanessa, and you. A public revelation. Heather seemed surprised. That seems theatrical. Sometimes theater serves a purpose, Wade replied. Especially when the audience includes decision-makers who need to understand that leadership changes are not merely business decisions, but moral imperatives. Heather studied him, reassessing. This isn't just about acquiring Lowell Industries for you, is it? This is personal. Wade met her gaze directly. Just as your interest isn't solely about financial security. We both want justice, Heather. The difference is, I've positioned myself to deliver it. After lunch, they parted with a new understanding. Wade provided Heather with selected evidence of Trent's affair, enough to convince her of its seriousness without yet revealing Vanessa's involvement. That particular revelation was reserved for Saturday evening. As Wade returned to Meridian's offices, his phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Confirmed final guest list for Saturday. 32 attending, including all your requests. Called caterer and florist. Need anything else? Wade smiled at the eager tone. Since learning of his new position, Vanessa had transformed back into the attentive wife she pretended to be early in their marriage. The performance would have been convincing if he hadn't seen the unfiltered truth of her contempt. Everything sounds perfect, he replied. This dinner needs to be memorable. It would be memorable indeed, just not in the way Vanessa imagined. Back at Meridian, Wade found Solomon waiting in his office, uncharacteristic concern on his face. We may have a complication, the older man said without preamble. Trent Lowell has requested a private meeting with me tomorrow. His assistant was vague about the purpose, but mentioned mutual business interests and potential collaboration. Wade considered this development. He's desperate. The board is turning against him. The stock is plummeting. And now his wife is quietly preparing for war. He's looking for allies anywhere he can find them. Or he's identified our strategy and is attempting to counter it, Solomon suggested. Should I take the meeting? Absolutely, Wade decided. Let him believe there might be a lifeline. The more false hope he has, the more devastating the fall will be. Solomon studied Wade, his expression thoughtful. This has become very personal for you. It was always personal, Wade replied. For Trent, for Vanessa, and now for me. The difference is, they never saw me as a threat. His smile was cold. That's about to change. The morning of the dinner party dawned with appropriate dramatic flair, thunderstorms clearing to reveal a pristine Boston sky, as if the universe itself approved of the reckoning to come. Wade stood in the master bedroom of the Beacon Hill house, adjusting his tie as Vanessa rushed about finalizing details. The florist delivered the wrong centerpieces. She fretted, phone pressed to her ear. I need the blue hydrangeas, not white. This is unacceptable. She covered the mouthpiece. Wade, what time will Solomon arrive? Should we seat him at your right or at the head of the table? My right, Wade replied, watching her through the mirror. The host sits at the head. The past week had been a fascinating study in human adaptation. Once Vanessa learned of Wade's new status as Meridian CEO, her behavior had transformed completely. Gone was the cold disdain, replaced by a performance of devoted wifehood that would have impressed Broadway critics. She touched him more, laughed at his comments, consulted him on household decisions that previously wouldn't have warranted mention. What she didn't know was that Wade had continued monitoring her communications with Trent. Their messages had grown increasingly frantic as Lowell Industries' position deteriorated. "What's Wade planning with this dinner?" Trent had texted yesterday. "Half my board accepted invitations without consulting me." "It's just his sad attempt to show off his new position," Vanessa had responded. "He's always been desperate for validation. Use it to your advantage. Charm the board members. Remind them of the Lowell legacy." Solomon Blackfield requested a meeting today. "He might be open to investment rather than acquisition. I need you to find out what Wade knows." "I'll handle Wade. You focus on Solomon. We can meet after dinner to compare notes." The shameless calculation would have hurt Wade once. Now it merely strengthened his resolve. "Perfect timing," Vanessa said, finishing her call as a text arrived on Wade's phone. "Who's that?" "Nadia," he replied truthfully, confirming some details for Monday's announcement. What he didn't share was the content. Acquisition paperwork finalized. Proxy votes secured. Board chairman confirmed support. "We're ready." "She works on weekends?" Vanessa asked with superficial interest. "That's dedication. Success requires sacrifice," Wade replied, meeting his wife's eyes in the mirror. "Some people understand that better than others." A flicker of unease crossed Vanessa's features before she masked it with a smile. "I should check on the caterers. The first guests arrive in an hour." After she left, Wade opened his safe and removed a sealed envelope containing copies of the evidence he'd compiled. Financial records, photographs, transcripts, and the most damning recorded conversations between Vanessa and Trent. Additional copies had already been distributed to secure locations with instructions for delivery to specific individuals under certain circumstances. Tonight, those circumstances would align perfectly. The dinner party began with calculated precision. Wade and Vanessa greeted guests in the foyer of their Beacon Hill home, a carefully curated collection of Boston's business elite, including 6 Lowell Industries board members, key shareholders, and influential industry figures. Solomon arrived early, as planned, engaging the board chairman in conversation about market trends, while carefully avoiding specific mention of Lowell Industries. Nadia circulated with practiced ease, her conversations seemingly casual while strategically reinforcing Meridian's strengths and innovation. Trent and Heather arrived 40 minutes after the first guests, a power move meant to establish importance. Trent's handshake was overly firm, his smile strained as he congratulated Wade on Meridian's success. "Quite the gathering," Trent observed, glancing around at the influential crowd. "Solomon mentioned you two have been working together for some time. I'm surprised Vanessa never mentioned it." "My wife respects confidentiality," Wade replied smoothly, a quality I've always appreciated. Beside Trent, Heather's smile held new knowledge, a dangerous edge that made Trent shift uncomfortably without understanding why. The evidence Wade had provided had confirmed her suspicions about her husband's infidelity, though she still didn't know the other woman's identity. That revelation would come with precise timing. Dinner proceeded with the appearance of normalcy, excellent food, flowing wine, and conversation that skillfully navigated between personal pleasantries and business insights. Wade, seated at the head of the table with Solomon to his right and the Lowell board chairman to his left, played the gracious host while monitoring the subtle currents of tension. Vanessa, at the opposite end, maintained her performance flawlessly, though Wade noticed her increasingly frequent glances at her phone beneath the table. Trent, seated between board members, worked desperately to control the narrative, emphasizing Lowell's heritage and downplaying recent setbacks. As dessert was served, Wade stood and tapped his glass for attention. "I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening," he began, particularly during such interesting times in our industry. His gaze swept the table, lingering momentarily on Trent's increasingly uneasy expression. Many of you have asked about the rumors concerning Meridian Technologies and our recent growth. Rather than address speculation, I've asked Solomon to make a brief announcement. Solomon rose, his authoritative presence commanding immediate attention. Thank you, Wade. As some of you may have heard, Meridian Technologies has been strategically acquiring positions in complementary businesses. What hasn't been public knowledge, until now, is the scale of our ambition. He paused for effect. On Monday morning, we'll be announcing a tender offer for Lowell Industries at a 15% premium over current market value. The table erupted in shocked murmurs. Trent half rose, his face flushing. This is absurd. The board would never. Actually, Trent, interrupted the board chairman, given Lowell's current situation, the board has fiduciary responsibility to consider any legitimate offer. He turned to Solomon. Though I'm surprised, this is the first we're hearing of it. Not entirely the first, Solomon replied. I've had confidential discussions with several board members over the past weeks. The formal offer will be presented Monday, but we wanted key stakeholders to hear it personally rather than through press releases. Wade watched as Vanessa's face drained of color, the implications becoming clear. Her eyes darted to Trent, who looked physically ill. This is a hostile takeover, Trent managed, struggling to maintain composure. There's nothing hostile about offering fair value to shareholders, Wade countered calmly, especially when current management has overseen a 40% decline in stock value over 2 years. The Lowell board members exchanged glances, their expressions confirming what Wade already knew. They had been preparing for this possibility, perhaps even welcoming it. In the interest of transparency, Wade continued, I should address the obvious question of my former employment with Lowell Industries. Some might perceive a conflict of interest. His smile held no warmth. To be completely transparent, there are personal elements intertwined with the professional in this situation. The atmosphere shifted, tension thickening as guests sensed deeper currents beneath the business discussion. Wade, Vanessa's voice held warning as she finally grasped the direction of his comments. Perhaps this isn't the appropriate venue for honesty. Wade interrupted. I disagree. When personal and professional ethics are compromised simultaneously, addressing one without the other would be incomplete. He removed the envelope from his jacket, placing it on the table. 3 months ago, I was terminated from Lowell Industries in a meeting that lasted less than 5 minutes. What I didn't know then, but have since confirmed, was that my termination was planned weeks in advance, with full knowledge of not just Mr. Lowell, but my wife. Gasps and uncomfortable shifts rippled around the table. Wade, you're embarrassing yourself, Trent attempted, though his voice lacked conviction. No, I'm simply providing context, Wade replied. Context that includes the 2-year affair between the CEO of Lowell Industries and the wife of an employee he deliberately undermined and discarded. The silence was absolute. Vanessa's face had gone from pale to ashen, her carefully constructed facade crumbling visibly. Across the table, Heather's expression transformed from shock to cold fury as she finally learned the identity of her husband's mistress. You're making serious accusations, the board chairman said carefully. Not accusations, statements of fact, supported by extensive evidence. Wade gestured to the envelope. Including financial transactions, communications and documented meetings at a Cambridge apartment maintained for this purpose through a Lowell Industries shell company. An inappropriate use of corporate resources that shareholders might find concerning. Trent stood abruptly. This is slander. I'll sue you for. Before you threaten litigation, Wade interrupted, you should know that copies of this documentation have been provided to Ms. Reeves and Mr. Bishop of Meridian's legal team, as well as to Mrs. Lowell's attorney, as of yesterday afternoon. Heather's cold smile confirmed this statement, sending Trent back into his seat as if physically struck. This is not how civilized people behave, Vanessa attempted, her voice shaking, airing private matters in public. I believe your sister-in-law said something similar when I lost my job, Wade replied. Now she'll finally leave you, he quoted, watching Heather's eyes widen at her own words thrown back, followed by laughter at his misfortune. Both of you seem to find my professional demolition amusing. I'm merely returning the courtesy. The dinner party dissolved into barely controlled chaos. Guests made hurried excuses to depart, though the Lowell board members lingered, suddenly eager for private conversations with Solomon and Nadia. Trent attempted damage control, moving between groups with increasingly desperate energy, while Vanessa remained frozen at the table's end, all pretense abandoned. Heather approached Wade as the crowd thinned, her expression unreadable. That was extraordinarily effective, she said quietly. Though not what I expected when we discussed aligned interests. I believe in comprehensive solutions, Wade replied. Will this impact your approach? Heather glanced at Trent, who was now cornered by two board members and the company's largest individual shareholder. Not at all. If anything, it strengthens my position considerably. She turned back to Wade. The prenup has specific clauses regarding infidelity with family members. Trent won't just lose control of the company. He'll lose everything. As the last guests departed, Trent finally confronted Wade directly, his earlier composure completely abandoned. You've destroyed everything, he hissed, close enough that Wade could smell the whiskey on his breath. Years of building Lowell, my reputation, Your what? Your marriage. Your affair. Your carefully constructed fiction. Wade's voice remained steady. You did that yourself, Trent. I simply expose what already existed. This isn't over, Trent threatened, though his voice held more desperation than menace. There are things you don't know, contingencies. There's nothing you can do that I haven't already anticipated, Wade interrupted. The acquisition proceeds Monday regardless of your personal actions. The board has effectively abandoned you. Your wife is already consulting divorce attorneys. And as for Vanessa, he glanced to where his wife stood alone, abandoned by both her lover and her social circle. I believe she'll be serving her own kind of sentence. After everyone had gone, Wade found Vanessa in the kitchen, mechanically loading Crystal into the dishwasher, an activity she would normally have left for the housekeeper. Why? She asked without looking up. You could have filed for divorce privately. The acquisition could have proceeded without this, Vanessa said. The same reason you and Trent discussed my termination weeks before it happened, instead of handling it professionally, Wade replied. The same reason Heather mocked me when I lost my job. Because some lessons require public consequences to be properly learned. Vanessa finally turned to face him, makeup streaked from silent tears. What happens now? Now I move permanently into my apartment downtown. Divorce papers will be delivered Monday morning, the same time Meridian's acquisition of Lowell becomes public. You have 30 days to vacate this house, which will be sold as part of the settlement. You've thought of everything, she said bitterly. I learned from watching you and Trent plan my professional execution, Wade replied. The difference is, I succeeded where you failed. As Wade left the house that had never truly felt like home, his phone buzzed with a text from Solomon. Phase 3 complete. Monday's proceedings on schedule. Extraordinary work tonight. Wade smiled as he slipped into the back of the waiting car. The foundation had been laid, the structure built, and now the final pieces were falling into place. The revenge he'd orchestrated was not merely professional or personal. It was existential, reshaping the very landscape in which they all operated. And he was only just beginning. Monday morning dawned with the precise chaos Wade had orchestrated. By 9 a.m., Meridian Technologies' tender offer for Lowell Industries dominated financial news, with analysts scrambling to assess implications while shareholders celebrated the premium. By noon, Lowell's board had announced an emergency meeting to evaluate the offer, conspicuously without mentioning Trent's input or leadership. In the gleaming conference room at Meridian's headquarters, Wade reviewed real-time market reactions with Solomon and Nadia. Lowell stock had surged on the announcement, while Meridian's continued its steady climb, A clear vote of confidence from investors. The board will accept by Wednesday, Solomon predicted, studying the analytics. Our private conversations with key members confirm they've lost faith in Trent completely. Saturday's revelations merely accelerated an inevitable conclusion. And Trent himself? Wade asked, though he already knew the answer from his various information channels. Nadia consulted her tablet. Currently barricaded in his office, refusing calls from board members and ignoring legal advisors. Our sources report he's been there since 5 a.m., shredding documents and attempting to access secured servers. Futile efforts, Wade noted. The board restricted his system access yesterday as a precautionary measure. Speaking of precautions, Solomon interjected, "Have you spoken with your son? The publicity surrounding this acquisition will inevitably include personal elements, given your history with Lowell." Wade nodded. "Caleb arrives this afternoon. I wanted him to hear everything directly from me before the media narrative takes shape." What Wade didn't share was his concern about how Caleb would react. Their relationship had improved in recent months, with regular calls and weekend visits, but Wade had carefully avoided discussing the full extent of his plans for Lowell and for Vanessa. Caleb had always been close to his stepmother, seeing only the carefully cultivated facade she presented to the world. "The divorce petition was delivered to your wife this morning," Nadia continued. "Her attorney has already requested an emergency consultation. Given the evidence, they'll likely advise her to settle quickly and quietly." "She won't," Wade replied with certainty. "Vanessa doesn't surrender easily, even when defeat is inevitable. She'll fight until every option is exhausted, then seek to negotiate from imagined leverage." His phone buzzed with a text. Heather Lowell, with whom he'd established an unusual alliance. "Divorce filed this morning. Emergency hearing granted due to extraordinary circumstances. Temporary freeze on all joint assets approved. T blocked from company headquarters by security. Thought you should know." Wade smiled slightly. Heather had proven to be a formidable operator in her own right, moving with ruthless efficiency once provided with the ammunition she needed. "The Lowell marriage is officially over," he informed Solomon and Nadia. "Heather has secured both a temporary asset freeze and Trent's removal from company premises." "Impressive timing," Solomon remarked. "One might almost suspect coordination." Wade merely inclined his head, neither confirming nor denying the observation. "If there's nothing else, I need to prepare for Caleb's arrival." The drive to Logan Airport gave Wade time to contemplate the coming conversation. Caleb had matured significantly during his time at NYU, developing a thoughtful independence that made Wade proud. But he had also inherited his father's loyalty, a quality that might make Vanessa's betrayal particularly difficult to process. Wade spotted Caleb immediately among the arriving passengers. Tall and lanky like Wade had been at 20, but with a confident stride that Wade had only developed recently. They embraced briefly, the initial awkwardness of their improving relationship still not fully resolved. "Quite the publicity campaign you've got going," Caleb remarked as they walked to the parking garage. "Your company is all over the financial news. Something about acquiring Uncle Trent's firm." The casual way Caleb referred to Trent, Uncle, reminded Wade how carefully he needed to navigate this conversation. "That's part of what we need to discuss," Wade replied. "There have been significant developments, both professionally and personally." In the car, Wade began with the business aspects, his partnership with Solomon, Meridian's growth, and the strategic acquisition of Lowell Industries. Caleb listened attentively, asking occasional questions that demonstrated his growing business acumen from his finance studies. "That's impressive, Dad," Caleb said when Wade finished the professional overview. "But something tells me there's more to this story. You mentioned personal developments." Wade took a deep breath. "Vanessa and I are divorcing." Caleb's expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Because of the acquisition. I know things were tense between you two. But because she's been having an affair with Trent for the past 2 years," Wade interrupted gently, "including during the period when he fired me from Lowell Industries, a decision they planned together. The color drained from Caleb's face. Are you sure? Vanessa always seemed so. I have irrefutable evidence, Wade confirmed. Financial records, photographs, recorded conversations. Their relationship directly influenced business decisions at Lowell, including my termination. Caleb stared out the window, processing. So the acquisition. It's revenge. It's business, Wade replied carefully. Lowell Industries is a valuable asset being mismanaged by its current leadership. But yes, there's a personal element I won't deny. Does Aunt Heather know? She does now. She's filed for divorce as well. Caleb shook his head, still struggling to reconcile this information with his understanding of their family. This is why you've been staying at that apartment downtown. You already knew. I discovered the affair shortly after losing my job, Wade confirmed. It's also why I've been encouraging you to delay visits home. I wanted to address the situation properly before involving you. They drove in silence for several minutes before Caleb spoke again. Vanessa called me this morning, he admitted. She was upset, said you were destroying the family with false accusations and corporate games, that I needed to talk sense into you. Wade's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. What did you tell her? That I'd hear your side before forming any opinions. Caleb turned to study his father's profile. She's been good to me, Dad. Made sure I felt welcome in your home. Remembered my birthdays when you were buried in work. It's hard to reconcile that person with what you're describing. People are complex, Wade acknowledged. Vanessa cultivated your loyalty because it served her purposes. She did the same with me for years until Trent offered a more advantageous arrangement. The bitterness in Wade's tone wasn't lost on Caleb. You really hate her now, don't you? I don't hate her, Wade corrected. Though this statement wasn't entirely true. I simply see her clearly for the first time, and I refuse to allow her actions to go unanswered. At Wade's downtown apartment, he showed Caleb selected evidence from the dossier Bradford Cole had compiled, enough to confirm the truth of his claims without subjecting his son to the more intimate details. Caleb reviewed the materials in silence. His expression grew increasingly troubled. They were laughing about your firing, he said finally, referencing an email exchange. Planning it like it was entertainment. Yes, Wade confirmed simply. And Aunt Heather's comment about Vanessa finally leaving you. That really happened. At a family dinner the night I lost my job. She didn't realize I overheard. Caleb set the documents aside, visibly shaken. I feel like I don't know any of these people. Including you, he added, meeting Wade's gaze directly. The father I grew up with would never have orchestrated something like this acquisition. He would have filed for divorce and moved on quietly. The father you grew up with was systematically undermined and devalued, Wade replied, surprising himself with his openness, both professionally and personally. This situation required a different response. Revenge, Caleb stated flatly. Justice, Wade countered. Trent and Vanessa conspired to destroy my career and dignity. They're now experiencing proportional consequences for those actions. Caleb was silent for a long moment. What happens after the acquisition? After the divorces? When you've taken everything from them? Then what? The question caught Wade off guard. In his single-minded focus on retribution, he had given little thought to what would follow his complete victory. Meridian will absorb Lowell's valuable assets and discard the rest, he answered, focusing on the business aspects. Professionally, I'll continue building what I've started with Solomon. And personally, Caleb pressed, when the revenge is complete, what fills that space? Wade had no immediate answer. The determination that had driven him for months had focused exclusively on dismantling what Trent and Vanessa had built, both their professional standing and their planned future together. He had given little thought to constructing something new for himself beyond Meridian's success. I suppose I'll figure that out when the time comes, he said finally. Caleb nodded, though his expression suggested the answer had disappointed him. Just be careful you don't become what you're fighting, Dad. Revenge has a way of hollowing people out. Later that evening, After Caleb had settled into the apartment's guest room, Wade stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, considering his son's warning. Had the pursuit of vengeance changed him fundamentally? Undoubtedly. The Wade Mercer who had walked into Trent's office 3 months ago would never have conceived of the events now unfolding. But transformation wasn't inherently negative. The old Wade had been passive, accepting disrespect and marginalization as his due. The new Wade commanded respect and wielded power effectively. Was that a corruption of character or simply growth? His phone rang. An unexpected call from Bradford Cole. "Mr. Mercer, we have a situation," the investigator said without preamble. "Trent Lowell left his house 20 minutes ago in an agitated state. Based on his recent communications, I'm concerned about his mental stability and destination." Wade's pulse quickened. "You think he's coming here?" "No, sir. Based on location tracking, he appears to be heading toward your former residence in Beacon Hill. Mrs. Mercer is currently there alone." Cold alarm replaced satisfaction. Whatever his feelings toward Vanessa, he had never intended for her to face physical danger. "Call the police," Wade instructed, "then continue monitoring. I'm on my way there now." "Sir, I strongly advise against personal involvement." But Wade had already ended the call, grabbing his keys and heading for the door. He paused only long enough to leave Caleb a note explaining his sudden departure. The drive to Beacon Hill took 15 agonizing minutes, during which Wade's mind conjured increasingly disturbing scenarios. Trent had always controlled his public image carefully, presenting as the composed business leader while privately revealing a volatile temperament. With everything stripped away, his company, his marriage, his reputation, what might he be capable of? Police vehicles were already present when Wade arrived, lights flashing against the elegant facades of neighboring homes. A small crowd of curious neighbors had gathered behind hastily established police tape. Wade identified himself to an officer, explaining his connection to the house and its occupants. "What's happening? Is everyone all right?" The officer's expression was professionally neutral. "We responded to reports of a disturbance. The situation is contained, but I can't provide further details until—" "Wade," Vanessa's voice interrupted as she emerged from the house, escorted by a female officer. She looked pale and shaken, but physically unarmed. "What are you doing here?" Before he could respond, paramedics emerged from the house, guiding a stretcher. Trent lay strapped to it, conscious but clearly sedated, an oxygen mask obscuring most of his face. "What happened?" Wade asked, turning back to Vanessa. Her composure cracked momentarily. "He showed up ranting about destruction and consequences. When I threatened to call police, She faltered. "He had a gun. Said if he couldn't have his company or his future, he'd make sure you couldn't enjoy taking them." Vanessa's eyes met Wade's, genuine fear visible. "I think he was planning to kill me, then himself." The cold calculation that had driven Wade's actions for months faltered in the face of this unexpected escalation. His revenge had been meticulously planned to dismantle careers and marriages, to expose deception and enforce consequences, but he had never contemplated violence. "Are you hurt?" he asked, surprising himself with his concern. Vanessa shook her head. "I managed to trigger the silent alarm before he—" She glanced toward the ambulance where Trent was being secured. The police arrived quickly. He turned the gun on himself, but an officer tackled him. The shot went into the ceiling. A detective approached, notebook in hand. "Mr. Mercer, I understand this situation involves complex personal and professional relationships. We'll need statements from everyone involved." The next several hours dissolved into police procedures, official statements, and careful navigation of the truth. Wade acknowledged the business acquisition and personal histories, while downplaying certain aspects that might complicate matters. By dawn, the immediate crisis had passed. Trent had been hospitalized on psychiatric hold. The weapon was secured as evidence, and preliminary charges of breaking and entering, assault, and attempted murder were filed. As Wade prepared to leave the police station, Vanessa approached him in the waiting area, looking exhausted but composed. "Your investigator called the police, didn't he?" she asked quietly. "That's how they responded so quickly, before I even triggered the alarm." Wade nodded, seeing no point in denial. "Bradford was monitoring Trent's movements as a precaution. I never anticipated this level of decompensation. You wanted to destroy us, not kill us," Vanessa observed with a bitter smile. "How ethical of you." "Violence was never part of my intention," Wade replied firmly. "But everything else was. It wasn't a question. The public humiliation, the professional devastation, the financial ruin, all carefully orchestrated for maximum impact." "As was my termination," Wade countered. "As was your affair. As was your plan to take everything in our divorce, once Trent had positioned himself to leave Heather." Vanessa didn't deny it. "We are who we are," she said instead. "I won't apologize for seeking advantage where I found it. Neither, obviously, will you." She studied him with new awareness. "I never saw this version of you coming. All those years, I thought I understood your limitations." "That was your fundamental mistake," Wade replied. "Confusing patience for weakness. Mistaking strategic restraint for lack of capacity. A mistake I won't make with the next man in my life," Vanessa said, gathering her purse. "Consider that my lesson learned from all this." As she walked away, Wade felt a strange mixture of emotions: satisfaction at the completion of his revenge, concern about the unexpected violent turn, and something like pity for the shallow calculation that defined Vanessa's worldview. When he returned to his apartment, he found Caleb awake and worried, having seen news reports about an incident at the Beacon Hill address. "Is Vanessa okay?" was his first question. "Physically, yes," Wade confirmed, explaining the situation in measured terms. "Trent broke down under the pressure. It's unfortunate, but not entirely surprising." Caleb studied his father. "And you? Are you satisfied now? Is this enough?" The question echoed in Wade's mind as he considered recent events. The acquisition was proceeding. Lowell Industries would soon be absorbed into Meridian. Trent faced criminal charges in addition to financial ruin and divorce. Vanessa would be removed from the house and the social circles she valued, her reputation permanently tarnished. Was it enough? The answer surprised him. "It's not about satisfaction anymore," Wade realized aloud. "It's about moving forward without these people controlling any aspect of my life." Caleb nodded slowly. "That sounds healthier than where you started." He hesitated before adding, "I'm staying in Boston for the week. I've already cleared it with my professors. I think we both could use the company right now." As Caleb headed to the kitchen to make coffee, Wade checked his phone and found a message from Solomon. "Board vote accelerated. Acquisition approved unanimously. Press conference tomorrow at 10 a.m. Congratulations, CEO Mercer. The future is yours to define." The future. For months, Wade had focused exclusively on dismantling the past: betrayals, humiliations, injustices. Now, with that work nearly complete, the wide-open question of what came next loomed before him like uncharted territory. The Lowell Industries acquisition was finalized with clinical precision. At the press conference, Wade presented a vision of strategic integration that impressed analysts and reassured employees about the transition. Behind the scenes, however, his approach was considerably less gentle. Clean sweep of upper management, he instructed Nadia as they reviewed organizational charts in Meridian's conference room. Anyone who directly enabled Trent's mismanagement or benefited from his nepotism is out. "That's nearly the entire executive team," Nadia pointed out, though her tone suggested approval rather than concern. "And several department heads. All replaceable," Wade confirmed. "Solomon's recruitment team has alternatives identified for critical positions. The rest can be filled through internal promotion of talent that was previously overlooked. People like I once was." The strategy was brutally effective. Within 10 days of the acquisition, Lowell Industries had been systematically dismantled, its valuable assets and talented personnel absorbed into Meridian, its inefficient processes abandoned, its enabling leadership dispersed. The Lowell family name, once synonymous with Boston business prestige, was methodically erased from corporate identity. The historic Lowell building downtown, which had housed the company for generations, was sold to developers who planned to convert it into luxury condominiums. "Isn't this excessive?" Caleb asked one evening, reviewing news coverage of the acquisition's aftermath. The company had been around for nearly a century. Erasing the name completely seems punitive. "It's practical," Wade countered, though they both recognized the partial truth. Meridian represents innovation and forward thinking. The Lowell brand had become associated with stagnation and outdated methodologies. Caleb's expression suggested skepticism, but he didn't press the point. During his extended stay in Boston, Caleb had witnessed his father's transformation up close. The driven focus, the strategic brilliance, but also the hardening that concerned him. "Have you spoken with Vanessa since that night?" Caleb asked, changing the subject. "Only through attorneys," Wade replied. "The divorce proceedings are moving forward expeditiously. Her leverage disappeared with the public exposure of her affair and Trent's incident. Trent himself is still under psychiatric evaluation. His legal troubles have expanded. Apparently, the gun was unregistered, adding weapons charges to the breaking and entering and assault. Heather's divorce is proceeding separately, with the prenuptial infidelity clauses fully enforced." Caleb nodded, processing this information. "So it's done then. They've lost everything, just as you planned." Wade recognized the judgment in his son's tone. "Actions have consequences, Caleb. They orchestrated my professional demise and planned to strip away everything I'd built. The difference is, I succeeded where they failed." "The difference," Caleb corrected quietly, "is that you're becoming someone who measures success by others' destruction." He closed his laptop and stood. "I'm heading back to New York tomorrow. My professors have been patient, but I need to return to classes." Wade felt a surprising pang at this announcement. Caleb's presence over the past 2 weeks had been unexpected comfort amid the chaos, a reminder of connections beyond revenge and acquisition strategies. "I understand," he said, then added with uncharacteristic uncertainty, "Will you be coming back for another visit soon?" Caleb studied his father, seeming to recognize the tentative overture. "That depends," he said finally, "on whether you're building something worth visiting or just burning down what others created." The question lingered with Wade long after Caleb departed. The following morning, he arrived at Meridian headquarters earlier than usual, finding the office quiet except for security personnel and a few dedicated early arrivers. In his expansive corner office, significantly larger than the cramped space he occupied at Lowell, Wade found Solomon waiting, reviewing documents with his habitual thoroughness. "You're here early," Wade observed, setting down his briefcase. "Important day," Solomon replied, sliding a folder across the desk. "Final dissolution paperwork for Lowell Industries as a separate entity. After today, it exists only as a historical footnote." Wade opened the folder, scanning the legal language that formalized the complete absorption of what had once been his brother-in-law's legacy. The signature line awaited his final authorization, the last step in erasing Trent Lowell's life's work. "Satisfying, isn't it?" Solomon remarked, watching Wade's expression. "Completing what we set out to accomplish." Wade closed the folder without signing. "What was your real motivation in all this, Solomon? You never fully explained why you targeted Lowell specifically, or why you selected me as your instrument." Solomon's smile was enigmatic. "Business opportunities present themselves in various forms. Lowell Industries had untapped potential being squandered by inadequate leadership. You had untapped potential being squandered in exactly the same way. The symmetry appealed to me." "That's not a complete answer." "No," Solomon acknowledged. "It isn't." He leaned back, studying Wade. 20 years ago, I approached Trent's father with a partnership proposal that would have transformed both our companies. He rejected it publicly, mockingly, in ways that cost me significant opportunities. When he died and Trent took over, I made a similar approach and received identical treatment. The Lowell arrogance was generational. So this was your revenge, Wade concluded, using me as your proxy. This was business, Solomon corrected, with a satisfying personal component, much like your own situation. He gestured to the folder. The question now is what comes next. The destruction phase is complete. The building phase is where leaders are truly tested. The parallel to Caleb's concerns wasn't lost on Wade. And if I decided not to complete this final step, if I chose to preserve some element of Lowell's identity, Solomon's expression revealed genuine curiosity. Is that what you want? After everything Trent did, Wade considered the question seriously. I want what I've always wanted, recognition of my abilities, and the freedom to apply them without artificial constraints. I have that now. He opened the folder again. Erasing Lowell completely doesn't serve any strategic purpose beyond personal satisfaction, and I'm discovering that such satisfaction is remarkably short-lived. With deliberate movements, Wade signed the dissolution papers, completing his business victory, while inwardly questioning its ultimate value. Revenge is ultimately hollow, Solomon observed, collecting the signed documents, a lesson most people learn too late, if at all. The question is whether you can transition from destruction to creation with your soul intact. My soul was never at risk, Wade replied, though without complete conviction. I simply ensured justice was served. Solomon's smile suggested he recognized the self-justification. As you say. In any case, congratulations are in order. Meridian is now positioned as one of Boston's most dynamic corporations, with you as its unquestioned leader. What you build with that platform is entirely your choice. After Solomon departed, Wade remained at his desk, contemplating the path that had brought him to this moment. 3 months ago, he had been a mid-level employee being summarily dismissed from a mediocre position by a brother-in-law who held him in contempt. Now he controlled a corporate empire, had orchestrated his betrayer's downfall, and stood at the threshold of unlimited opportunity. Yet Caleb's concern lingered, as did the unsettling parallel with Solomon's decades-old grudge. Was Wade at risk of defining himself permanently through the lens of vengeance? Of measuring his worth by his capacity to destroy rather than create? His phone buzzed with a text from Heather Lowell, the first communication since Trent's breakdown. Divorce finalized today. Prenup enforced in full. Trent transferred to long-term psychiatric facility. Thought you should know. The message contained no emotion, no judgment, simply an exchange of information between unlikely allies whose arrangement had served its purpose. Wade texted back a simple acknowledgement, then called his attorney for an update on his own divorce proceedings. Nearly complete, Mr. Mercer, his lawyer reported. Mrs. Mercer's counsel has accepted our terms with minimal negotiation. She keeps her personal property, receives a modest settlement that acknowledges the marriage duration without rewarding her misconduct, and relinquishes all claims to the house, which will proceed with selling, as instructed. In her current situation, Wade asked, surprising himself with the question. A pause. I understand she's relocated to a downtown apartment and has begun interviewing for positions. Several firms have declined due to the publicity surrounding recent events. After ending the call, Wade stood at his office windows, gazing across Boston's skyline toward Beacon Hill, where the house he had shared with Vanessa stood empty now, awaiting new owners who knew nothing of the betrayals and calculations that had transpired within its walls. His revenge was complete. Trent was institutionalized, his company absorbed, his marriage dissolved, his reputation destroyed. Vanessa was displaced, diminished, struggling to rebuild a life without the advantages she had so carefully cultivated. Heather had emerged relatively unscathed financially, but with her social standing inevitably altered by association with scandal. And Wade himself. He had wealth, power, professional respect, everything he had been denied before. Yet Caleb's assessment echoed persistently. Was he building something worth visiting or merely burning what others had created? That evening, instead of returning to his downtown apartment, Wade drove to the Boston Public Library, the place where, months earlier, he had begun plotting his methodical revenge. Now he sat surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of centuries, considering what meaningful construction might follow his campaign of strategic destruction. His phone buzzed with an email from Nadia. Leadership team selections complete for review. Integration proceeding ahead of schedule. Board extremely pleased with transition management. The professional machinery continued functioning perfectly, exactly as he had designed it. But the personal reconstruction Caleb had challenged him to undertake remained undefined. As Wade left the library, he passed a homeless man huddled in a doorway. A stark reminder of how quickly fortune could turn. 3 months ago, Wade himself had stood at the precipice of potential financial ruin, cast aside by people who should have supported him. He paused, removed several bills from his wallet, and placed them in the man's cup. "Thank you, brother," the man said, genuine gratitude in his weathered face. "Second chance coming your way someday." The simple interaction lingered with Wade as he drove home. Second chances, wasn't that ultimately what he had created for himself? Not just revenge, but an opportunity to define himself anew. Without the constraints and undermining influences that had limited him before, the question became how to use that opportunity, whether to remain defined by the destruction he had orchestrated, or to build something that transcended it. At his apartment, Wade found an unexpected package, a small box with Caleb's handwriting on the shipping label. Inside was a framed photograph of Wade and Caleb from years earlier, fishing on a lake during one of their rare father-son weekends. Both were smiling, genuinely happy in each other's company. Attached was a simple note. "This is the father I remember. Hope to see him again when the dust settles." Wade placed the photograph on his desk, the simple image a powerful contrast to the complex machinery of revenge he had constructed. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to consider a future defined by something other than retribution, a future that might include rebuilding relationships rather than dismantling them. The next morning, Wade made 2 unexpected decisions. First, he established a significant scholarship fund at NYU's business school, specifically targeting students from disadvantaged backgrounds who demonstrated potential beyond their circumstances. The fund would be substantial enough to transform lives, focusing on the type of overlooked talent Wade himself had once represented. Second, he directed Meridian's legal team to establish a separate entity, a small subsidiary that would preserve limited elements of the Lowell legacy, specifically some of the charitable foundations that had done genuine good work before becoming corrupted under Trent's leadership. "Are you sure about this?" Nadia asked when he outlined the plan. After everything that happened, the actions of one man shouldn't erase generations of positive impact, Wade replied. "Selective preservation serves both our corporate image and the communities that benefited from these programs." The decision wasn't about forgiveness. Wade had no intention of rehabilitating Trent's reputation or excusing what he and Vanessa had done. Rather, it represented a first step toward defining himself through creation rather than destruction, through selective preservation rather than indiscriminate erasure. When Wade called Caleb that evening to explain these initiatives, his son's response was measured but encouraging. "It's a start," Caleb acknowledged. "Building something new instead of just burning down the old. I'm finding that destruction, however justified, has limited satisfaction," Wade admitted. "There has to be something beyond it." "Most people figure that out eventually," Caleb replied. "Usually before orchestrating corporate takeovers and public humiliations, but everyone works at their own pace." The gentle teasing suggested a thawing in their relationship, a possibility of moving forward, rather than remaining trapped in judgment of past actions. "I'm thinking of coming to New York next weekend," Wade said. "If you're not too busy with classes, perhaps we could spend some time together." "I'd like that," Caleb agreed. "Though fair warning, I might put you to work helping with my finance projects. Seems like you've developed some relevant experience lately." After the call ended, Wade stood at his apartment windows, watching darkness descend over Boston. The hunger for revenge that had driven him for months had been sated, perhaps not completely, but substantially enough to allow new priorities to emerge. The empire he had built from the ashes of betrayal was solid and growing. The question now was whether he could find as much satisfaction in creation as he had in calculated destruction, and whether the man he had become in pursuit of justice could evolve into someone defined by more than his capacity for retribution. 6 months after the acquisition that had transformed both Meridian Technologies and Wade Mercer himself, Boston's business community gathered at the revitalized Innovation Center for the annual Economic Leadership Summit. As keynote speaker, Wade stood at the podium surveying faces that now regarded him with respect rather than dismissal, a transformation as complete as that of the companies he controlled. Disruption is often mischaracterized as purely destructive, he told the assembled executives and entrepreneurs. In reality, it's regenerative, clearing space for innovations that better serve evolving needs. The key is ensuring that what you build in the aftermath is stronger, more ethical, and more sustainable than what came before. The irony of these words wasn't lost on Wade. His own disruption of Lowell Industries had begun as calculated revenge before evolving into something more complex, a genuine reimagining of what both companies could become when freed from outdated leadership and systemic limitations. After his presentation, Wade navigated the reception with practiced ease, accepting congratulations from former skeptics and fielding partnership proposals from companies that had once rejected his ideas. Solomon remained a key ally, though their relationship had evolved from mentor-protege to something closer to equals, as Wade consistently demonstrated his capabilities. Quite a different reception from last year's event, Solomon observed, joining Wade near the refreshments. When you were still at Lowell, didn't Trent refuse to let you attend at all? He claimed the invitation was for executive leadership only, Wade confirmed, though he brought his golf partner instead. Solomon nodded thoughtfully. Speaking of Trent, have you heard the latest? The psychiatric facility is recommending his release next month. Apparently, the medication regimen has stabilized his condition. Wade absorbed this information with surprising equanimity. 6 months earlier, news of Trent's potential release would have triggered immediate strategic calculations, how to counter any possible retaliation, how to ensure continued containment of potential threats. Now, it registered as information requiring acknowledgement, but not defensive action. Is he still facing criminal charges? Wade asked. Reduced based on psychiatric evaluations, but not eliminated, Solomon replied. His legal team is negotiating a plea arrangement, probation, continued treatment, significant restrictions. He'll never work in corporate leadership again. The completeness of Trent's fall from grace should have provided satisfaction. Instead, Wade felt an unexpected hollowness, the final confirmation that revenge, however thorough, eventually yielded diminishing returns. And Heather? He inquired, maintaining the appearance of casual interest. Remarried last month, I believe. Shipping magnate from Seattle. A strategic alliance for both parties. Solomon studied Wade's expression. You've had no contact since the acquisition finalized. None, Wade confirmed. Our arrangement served its purpose. Neither of us saw value in maintaining connection beyond that. The conversation shifted to business matters. Meridian's latest expansion, technological innovations, their research division developing potential international partnerships. Throughout, Wade maintained his focus and engagement, though part of his mind continued processing the news about Trent, not with anger or concern, but with something approaching indifference. Later that evening, Wade sat alone in his office reviewing quarterly projections when his assistant notified him of an unexpected visitor. Vanessa Mercer is asking to see you, she reported, clearly uncomfortable with the awkward situation. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's very insistent. Wade's immediate instinct was to refuse. Their divorce had finalized 4 months earlier, with no contact since the final paperwork was signed. What possible purpose could this visit serve? Curiosity overcame caution. Send her in. Vanessa entered with remnants of her former confidence. Designer clothes, perfect makeup, practiced poise. But subtle changes revealed her altered circumstances. The clothes were last season's, the makeup slightly too carefully applied, the confidence more performance than substance. "Wade," she greeted him, stopping a respectful distance from his desk. "Thank you for seeing me. What can I do for you, Vanessa?" he asked, neither hostile nor welcoming. She took a measured breath. "I'm relocating to Chicago next week. A fresh start with a marketing firm that doesn't know or care about Boston scandals." A pause. "I wanted to see you before I left." "Why?" The question was genuine rather than accusatory. Closure, perhaps, or acknowledgement. She met his gaze directly. "You won, Wade. Completely and thoroughly. I lost everything that mattered to me. Security, status, future prospects. Even Trent, though that relationship proved less substantial than I'd convinced myself." Wade studied her, searching for the manipulation beneath the apparent candor. "What do you want from me? Forgiveness? Reconciliation?" "Neither is realistic," Vanessa replied with unexpected honesty. "I wouldn't trust forgiveness if offered. And reconciliation would be grotesque after everything that's happened." She adjusted her purse, strapped nervously. "I suppose I wanted to understand." "Understand what?" "How I misjudged you so completely. I spent years believing I understood your limitations, your boundaries. Then in 3 months, you orchestrated a complete reversal of our positions." There was something like reluctant admiration in her tone. "I never saw it coming." "That was your fundamental mistake," Wade observed. "Confusing patience for weakness. Mistaking strategic restraint for lack of capacity." "A mistake I won't repeat," Vanessa acknowledged. "I underestimated you. Trent underestimated you. We're both living with the consequences." The conversation should have provided satisfaction. His former wife acknowledging her miscalculation, admitting defeat, validating his triumph. Instead, Wade felt a complex mixture of emotions that didn't include the vindication he might have expected months earlier. "Why are you really here, Vanessa?" She hesitated, then spoke with uncharacteristic directness. "I saw you on television last week, the interview about Meridian's expansion. You looked different. Not just successful, but at peace somehow." A pause. "I wanted to understand how you moved forward while Trent and I remained trapped in the consequences." The insight surprised Wade. It was true that in recent months, as Meridian's success continued and his relationship with Caleb strengthened, he had found himself increasingly unburdened by thoughts of revenge or justice. The consuming focus on Trent and Vanessa had gradually diminished, replaced by genuine interest in building something meaningful. "I stopped defining myself through you," he said finally. "Both of you." The revenge was necessary, a correction of profound injustice, but remaining fixated on it would have been self-defeating. "So you simply moved on," Vanessa observed, a hint of bitterness in her tone. "While we remain defined by what happened." "Your choices defined you long before my response to them," Wade pointed out. "The difference is, those choices are now visible to everyone, including yourselves." Vanessa accepted this assessment with a slight nod. "Fair enough." She glanced around his office. The symbols of success and status that had once been exclusively her domain of expertise. "You've built something impressive here. Whatever your motivation, the results speak for themselves." As she prepared to leave, Wade was surprised to realize he felt no animosity toward her. No lingering anger or desire for further retribution. She had been thoroughly defeated, her betrayal exposed and punished proportionately. Continuing to focus on her destruction would only diminish his own progress. "Good luck in Chicago, Vanessa," he said, the words neither forgiveness nor reconciliation, but something more pragmatic, an acknowledgement that their chapter had definitively closed. After she left, Wade returned to his quarterly projections, but found his focus interrupted by unexpected reflection. When had the burning desire for revenge been replaced by something calmer and more constructive? When had Trent and Vanessa shifted from central preoccupations to peripheral concerns? The answer came gradually as he considered the past 6 months. It hadn't been a single moment, but an accumulation of realizations, seeing opportunities beyond retribution, finding satisfaction in creation rather than destruction, reconnecting with Caleb, building something worthy of pride rather than merely tearing down what others had created. His phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. Just got my final grades. Dean's List again. Dinner next weekend to celebrate. Wade smiled as he replied, absolutely. Proud of you. Name the place. The simple exchange represented everything his revenge had not: connection, growth, future orientation. While the acquisition of Lowell had provided necessary justice, these smaller human moments offered something revenge could never provide: genuine fulfillment. The following weekend, Wade flew to New York for dinner with Caleb. They met at a small Italian restaurant in the village, casual and unpretentious. Nothing like the status-conscious establishments Vanessa had preferred. You seem different, Caleb observed as they waited for their main courses. More, I don't know, present. Less driven by whatever was fueling you 6 months ago. Wade considered this assessment. I've been thinking about something you said during that difficult period. About whether I was building something worth visiting or just burning what others created. I remember, Caleb nodded. It was pretty judgmental of me. It was necessary, Wade corrected, and ultimately accurate. The acquisition served justice, but justice alone is an insufficient foundation for a meaningful life. So what comes next? Caleb asked, now that the revenge tour is complete. Wade smiled at the characterization. Building something worth inheriting. I suppose, he hesitated, then added, I've been considering establishing a foundation. Something separate from Meridian, but aligned with its resources, focusing on supporting overlooked talent, providing opportunities to people systematically excluded from traditional success pathways. People like you were, Caleb noted. Exactly. The scholarship fund was a start, but there's potential for something more comprehensive. Mentorship programs, business incubation, targeted investments. Caleb studied his father with approving interest. That sounds like something built to last, not just to prove a point. Later that evening, walking through Washington Square Park, Wade found himself truly content for perhaps the first time since the upheaval began. The rage that had fueled his methodical revenge had burned itself out, leaving not emptiness, but space for new growth. His phone buzzed with a text. Solomon, with an update on Meridian's latest acquisition target. Business continued. Evolution proceeded. Opportunities expanded. But these professional developments now existed within a broader context of human connection and meaningful construction. Justice had been served completely and irreversibly. Trent and Vanessa had faced the consequences of their betrayal. The company they had used as an instrument of Wade's humiliation now existed only as a subsidiary of his far more successful enterprise. But the true victory wasn't in their destruction. It was in what Wade had built from the ashes of that necessary conflagration. A corporate empire, yes, but also a reconnection with his son, a foundation for supporting others facing similar barriers. And most importantly, a version of himself no longer defined by reaction to others' limitations and betrayals. As he and Caleb continued their walk through the park, Wade noticed a chess player demonstrating remarkable strategic thinking, despite having lost most of his pieces. The player's focus wasn't on what had been taken from him, but on how to maximize his remaining strengths to create new possibilities. The parallel wasn't lost on Wade. His own strategic brilliance had been forged in response to catastrophic loss, but had evolved beyond revenge into genuine creation. The pieces Trent and Vanessa had tried to remove from his life had been replaced by stronger, more valuable alternatives. What are you thinking about? Caleb asked, noticing his father's contemplative expression. That winning isn't always what we initially think it is, Wade replied. 6 months ago, I defined victory as Trent and Vanessa's complete destruction. Now I see it differently. How so? Caleb asked. True victory isn't just watching your enemies fall, Wade said, his eyes tracking the chess player's calculated moves. It's building something so significant that their existence becomes irrelevant to your story. As they continued walking, Wade reflected on the journey that had transformed him. The ruthlessness he'd discovered within himself, that cold, calculating capacity for strategic destruction, remained. He hadn't forgiven Trent or Vanessa. He never would. Their betrayal had been too calculated, too personal to warrant absolution. But he had transcended the need to define himself through their downfall. I saw Vanessa recently, Wade mentioned casually. She's moving to Chicago. Caleb's eyebrows rose in surprise. How was that? Oddly anticlimactic, Wade admitted. She wanted to understand how I moved forward while she remained trapped in the consequences. And what did you tell her? The truth, that I stopped defining myself through her and Trent. Wade paused at a park bench, inviting his son to sit. She seemed to think I'd simply moved on. But that's not quite accurate. I haven't forgotten or forgiven. I simply refused to remain confined by the boundaries of revenge. Caleb studied his father. Is that what the foundation is about? Proving you're more than your revenge? Partially, Wade acknowledged. But it's also about recognizing patterns. Trent didn't just underestimate me. He systematically excluded people with potential, but without connections. The system is designed to keep certain people out, regardless of their capabilities. I want to break that pattern. While still ensuring Trent and Vanessa never recover, Caleb noted perceptively. Wade's smile held no apology. I've instructed our legal team to maintain certain monitoring protocols. If either of them attempts to rebuild in Boston's business community, they'll find unexpected obstacles. It's not active destruction anymore, just a standing insurance policy. Remind me never to cross you, Caleb said, half joking. You're the one person who never has to worry about that, Wade replied with genuine warmth. You challenged me when I needed it most, when revenge was consuming everything else. That took courage. As evening settled over the park, father and son made plans for Caleb's upcoming summer internship at Meridian, not in Wade's office, but in the innovation division where his finance skills could develop independently. The next morning, before returning to Boston, Wade received a call from Solomon. Interesting development. The older man began without preamble. Trent's release has been delayed another 3 months. Apparently, he had a significant setback when he learned about Meridian's newest acquisition, the Cambridge property development where his secret apartment was located. Is that so? Wade replied. His tone neutral though satisfaction flickered briefly. The building will be demolished next month for the new Meridian Innovation Campus, Solomon continued. Quite the symbolic gesture, though I'm sure that's merely coincidental in your planning. Wade didn't bother denying the calculated symbolism. Progress requires clearing outdated structures. After ending the call, Wade checked his calendar. Board meetings, strategic planning sessions, the foundation launch, and dinner with the governor next week. His empire continued expanding, built on the ashes of betrayal, but no longer defined by it. On the flight back to Boston, Wade reviewed architectural plans for the Innovation Campus, a structure designed to nurture precisely the talent that traditional corporate hierarchies overlooked. The site of Trent and Vanessa's secret meetings would become a center for emerging business leaders from disadvantaged backgrounds. The poetry of this transformation wasn't accidental. Wade had not forgiven or forgotten. The ruthlessness that had enabled his meteoric rise remained intact, merely channeled into more productive avenues. His betrayers would live with the consequences of their actions for the rest of their lives, their names erased from the institutions they had valued, their futures permanently diminished. But Wade himself had moved beyond mere retribution. The empire he had built from the ashes of betrayal now cast its own light, no longer dependent on the flames of revenge for illumination. As his plane descended toward Boston, Wade gazed at the skyline where Meridian's headquarters now dominated, a visible reminder that sometimes the most complete revenge isn't destroying your enemies, but rendering them footnotes in the story of your ascension. He would never forgive those who had betrayed him, but he had refused to grant them the power to define his future. That was the final victory. Not mercy, but transcendence. Not forgiveness, but something far more devastating. Indifference from a position of absolute triumph. 1 year to the day after the dinner party that had exposed Trent and Vanessa's betrayal, Wade stood at the podium of Meridian's new innovation campus, addressing the inaugural class of foundation scholars. 50 bright minds from backgrounds of limitation rather than privilege, each with potential that traditional systems had overlooked. From his position at the back of the auditorium, Caleb watched with quiet pride as his father outlined a vision of opportunity and excellence that would reshape Boston's business landscape for generations. Success isn't inherited or granted, Wade told the attentive students. It's claimed through vision, determination, and the refusal to accept artificial limitations imposed by others. Among the audience sat business leaders, politicians, and influencers, the same social circles that had once dismissed Wade as inconsequential. Now they competed for his attention, sought his endorsement, courted his favor. Meanwhile, across town, Trent Lowell, finally released from psychiatric care, moved into a modest apartment provided by his cousin. His attempts to secure even entry-level positions had been mysteriously thwarted, his family name now associated with scandal rather than prestige, his financial resources depleted by legal battles and divorce settlements. In Chicago, Vanessa struggled with the anonymous mediocrity of middle management at a marketing firm where her carefully cultivated Boston connections meant nothing. Her attempts to rebuild her social standing had faltered repeatedly, undermined by background checks and whispered warnings that seemed to materialize whenever opportunity appeared. Wade knew all this, not because he actively monitored their decline, but because information naturally flowed to those in positions of power. Their continued struggles registered as simple data points, confirmation that justice remained in effect without requiring his ongoing attention. After the ceremony, as Wade and Caleb walked through the campus that had risen from the ashes of betrayal, Caleb asked the question that had lingered between them. "Are you satisfied now with how everything turned out?" Wade considered this thoughtfully, looking at the impressive structure around them, a physical manifestation of his vision, built literally on the ground where his betrayers had plotted his downfall. "Satisfaction implies an endpoint," he replied finally. "What I found is something different. Momentum. The capacity to build without limits, to create without permissions, to define success on my own terms." He hadn't forgiven. The ruthlessness that had enabled his rise remained intact, cold and calculating when necessary. Trent and Vanessa would never recover from what he had done to them, and Wade had ensured their continued diminishment through subtle, nearly untraceable mechanisms. But his own story had expanded beyond the boundaries of revenge. The empire he had built now served purposes larger than retribution, though it had been forged in those unforgiving fires. "So what's next?" Caleb asked as they reached Wade's office, with its commanding view of the Boston skyline. Wade smiled, genuine warmth replacing the cold calculation that had driven him during those critical 3 months of vengeance. "Next, we build something they could never imagine, because their vision was always limited by what they could take from others, while ours is defined by what we can create." He hadn't forgotten. He hadn't forgiven. But he had transcended. And that was the most complete revenge of all.